Well, good morning again, everyone. Hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. I guess a couple weeks since we've been together, but it's good to pick up again. And it's hard to believe we're in the Advent season. So, all right, well, why don't we just pick up where we left off in the Gospel of John? All righty. Y'all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, whoops, I'm not at the right chapter here. So we just finished the story of the raising of Lazarus, and talked a bit about how this event was, it was brought about for the glory of God, and how Jesus knew all along what he was going to do. So when he got upset, it wasn't because Lazarus had died, it was because the others around him still did not believe what he was able to do, what God was able to do through him. And so he eventually raises Lazarus from the dead, and Lazarus comes out. He's bound hand and foot by the burial cloths, which will be an image we want to remember, because when John tells the story of Jesus's resurrection, he makes it very clear that the burial cloths are in the tomb, and that Jesus is now free of them. So we talked about how what happened to Lazarus we would call a resuscitation, in that a dead body came back to life, whereas what happens to Jesus is a resurrection, which means his human body is transformed into a glorified body that is no longer bound by time and space, although it can engage time and space, and that ultimately that's what is going to happen to us. We are not awaiting a resuscitated body, we are waiting for a resurrected body. So any questions before we move on?
No.
I wanted to say one thing. When we read that, it made me think of Father Miller many, many years ago when I first joined the church, and he preached on the raising of Lazarus, and I can still see him. He was up on the up at the pulpit, and he just started. He said, "Lazarus, Lazarus, come out!" And he started jumping around like he was bound. And I've never forgotten it. Every time I read it, I just can see him. It was just so profound at that point.
It's a great story. I once heard, how there are storytellers, and what she would do would take a story like this, and she would use all the words of the gospel, but she would then also add other things and gestures, as if she's acting it out and as she goes along. And it was so powerful, to see this story sort of acted out. It's really it's an amazing story. It is the final story of the signs. The ultimate sign will be the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but this is the final of the series of signs in John's gospel that point to Jesus as the Son of God. And as we'll see as we move on, this will be the sign, the final sign that begins is the catalyst for the plot against Jesus's life. So why don't we go right into that? If someone would like to read, starting at verse 45.
Hey, Father Rich, excuse me. Before we go, you had gave an explanation on a glorified body and the resurrected body. Could you touch on that again?
Okay, a glorified body is a resurrected body.
Is the resurrected body? Okay.
Yeah, it's a resuscitated body is what Lazarus had, and that is when a dead body is resuscitated, comes back to life.
Mhm.
But it's still a human ordinary body bound by time and space. So that's why when Lazarus came out, he was still bound by the burial cloths in which he had been wrapped.
Mhm.
But a resurrected body is a glorified, transformed body that is no longer bound by time and space.
Okay, I might have got it confused with the resuscitated body.
Yeah, so it's resuscitation versus resurrection.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, who would like to read starting at 45?
I can read. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Session of the Sanhedrin. Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seeing what he had done began to believe in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, "What are we doing? What are we going to do? This man is performing many signs. If we leave him alone, all will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing, nor do you consider that it is better for you that one man should die instead of the people, so that the whole nation may not perish." He did not say this on his own, but since he was high priest for that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not only for the nation, but also to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to kill him. So
Okay,
Jesus,
let's
Oh.
stop right there.
okay.
All right, what are your first impressions of that passage?
Well, of course, there begins the plot.
I kind of question what if we leave him alone, verse 48, the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation. How does that? I don't get that part.
You know what, Michael? I was on the same line as you. I was watching that too, and I said, "Did I miss that or something?" I went to sleep on that passage. I just don't remember that one. And this is the reasoning that they gave for beginning to plot his demise.
Yeah, why would Jesus performing signs lead to the Romans taking away their land and their nation?
So
Well, what they had planned. Oh, go.
go ahead.
No, I was thinking what they had planned to do was precisely what happened after Jesus's death, what they were trying to avoid doing.
Right, yeah, that's the note that's attached to that verse. Why do you think, what is the concern about the Romans?
That they're going to come and take away their land.
Well, no, but why if the people believe in Jesus, why would the Romans come and take away their land and their nation?
Because he can't be more powerful than Caesar, number one. I guess that's the main reason. And if he's more powerful than Caesar, then they would come and try to destroy all the people. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of twofold. Obviously, the most important is what Dia is saying, is if the Romans see, if people believe in Jesus and kind of make him king, and the Romans see that as a threat to their authority, then they're likely to come in and stamp out they'll see it as a insurrection, and they will come to stamp it out. The other thing is about the Roman Empire is that in order to practice a religion other than the official religion of Rome, you needed permission. So the Jews had permission to practice their own religion, but they were, basically given that permission as long as their practice of their religion didn't create any upstarts. So that would be another reason that if people started believing in Jesus as sort of part of their religion, the Romans would say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't approve that. So, you can't practice that religion anymore. So the Romans pretty much want to make sure they're in control. And if the people start believing in Jesus, he becomes a threat to that.
I have a little footnote here that says the Jewish leaders knew if they didn't stop Jesus, the Romans would discipline them. Rome gave partial freedom to the Jews as long as they were quiet and obedient. Jesus' miracles often caused a disturbance. The leaders feared that Rome's displeasure would cause them to lose their jobs or be punished.
Yep.
Isn't
Maybe,
it?
maybe not. Maybe
Oh.
not.
Oh, wow. Who's that screaming?
Me, I'm sorry. Maybe not. I'm just saying, like, okay. What I'm saying, I'm thinking is, we talked about before. Father told us that they had a choice to, to kill Jesus or not. They had a choice. They didn't have to go that way, but they decided to go that way. And I'm thinking, maybe not the Jewish, because as we get down a little further, when they are taking Jesus to Pilate, they wanted him to do the miracles themselves. They wanted to see the miracles. So I'm sitting here going, maybe they would have did something, and maybe they would have tried to control Jesus when they found that he could do miracles. I'm thinking, because everybody wants to see a miracle, even the Romans. So when they took him to Pontius Pilate and Herod, they both wanted to see miracles. And if Jesus had complied with them, I think they would have tried to keep those miracles within the Romans. And, everything that I know about the Romans, they probably would have set Jesus up and made people pay to have the miracles. Have the miracles performed. I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
Well, that could be there. Again, this is where we want to not mix too many of the gospels together. So the idea of Jesus being taken to Pilate and Herod and wanting to see a miracle and everything, that's actually in the other gospels. It's not in the Gospel of John. When we get to that part in this gospel, you're going to see it's much more about politics and power, and who is Caesar and who is the friend of Caesar and who is the king and who has authority. Remember, this is the gospel in which Pilate says to Jesus, I have the power to take your life or to give the life, or whatever, however he says it. And Jesus says, you would have no power if it were not given to you from above. So in this gospel, I'm not so sure the Romans want to see any signs or miracles, because even they would be a threat to their power. Because if Jesus displayed that power, the Romans might lose power. So in John's gospel, it's all going to be about power. You'll see that when we get to it.
Oh, so I was thinking too, Father Rich, when I read this, about the politics of the Jewish state today. They're still fighting. Didn't the Jews establish a Jewish state in Palestine? Aren't they still fighting?
Well, yeah, the dynamics in modern day Israel is very different from what is happening here. So I'm not not so sure, I would draw a parallel between the sort of the Israelites of the ancient world and the Israelis of the current world, the present.
Okay,
I
Um,
haven't, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Father Rich. I'm sorry.
no, I was done.
Oh, I just looked at in 46. The conflict again is being set up with the Pharisees, and I was just wondering, why do people always find it necessary to go and tell the Pharisees, and then this conflict is set up again with the head-to-head to Jesus? I just find that interesting. In most of the stories we read, they're always drawn in. And I'm just wondering why they find it necessary to always have to tell them what Jesus has done. I mean, I think the word's already been spread around that this man was performing signs. Excuse me. Excuse me, I'll stop right there. Excuse me.
Okay, so remember the Pharisees or Phariseeism
Right there.
is a movement within Judaism. And in Jesus's day, it was probably the largest movement. So today how we have Orthodox Jews and conservative Jews and Reformed Jews and with the Reconstructionist Judaism. You know how we have those different classifications of Judaism?
Yeah.
But it would have been similar then. So in Jesus's time, you had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots were the four largest movements of Judaism during that time. And of those four, the Pharisees was far and wide the largest movement. So they would have been considered sort of mainstream Judaism at the time, the Pharisaical movement. And as I've said before, many scholars, and I personally believe that Jesus himself was a Pharisee. In other words, he was from that school of thinking. Remember the Sadducees, they were a smaller group, tended to be more like the aristocrats. The Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead. They did not believe in angels. We were told that in the Gospels, and we know that Jesus obviously believed in the resurrection of the dead and believed in angels as well. So he would have probably been more of a Pharisee than a Sadducee. But in John's Gospel in particular, but the others, remember when they just say the Pharisees, they're really talking about the leaders of the Pharisees.
Okay.
So the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin. Well, the Sanhedrin is a governing body of Israel at the time. So the Pharisees, their ability to convene the Sanhedrin had to do because they were the leaders of the Pharisees.
Okay.
So we always.
So that's like the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent. But remember in John's Gospel, particularly when he says the Jews and he says the Pharisees, he's not talking about all the Jews and he's not talking about all the Pharisees. He's using that typically as shorthand for the leaders. So the leaders of the Jews and the leaders of the Pharisees. But yeah, I think primarily, well, most likely as a historical matter, the Pharisees were the ones that were in conflict with Jesus, but also probably because they were the largest group of Judaism. The Essenes were a pretty small group, so if he was in conflict with the Essenes, nobody would have cared. Does that make sense, Michael?
Yes.
So my question is 53, verse 53. So from that day on, they planned to kill Jesus. If one of the commandments says, "Thou shalt not kill," how is it that they justify this verse?
Well, that's, I think, the whole point of this passage is probably the most important passage, is what's motivating them. And it's in there. It's in one of your verses there. Look a few verses up. You'll see what is said. What does Caiaphas say for the justification of this?
I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, yes, this what Michael
You
talked
owe
about
nothing.
earlier.
It's better that one man die
Well,
instead
you
of the
owe nothing
people,
to
so
die.
the whole nation may not perish.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a crucial passage in the Gospel of John, because what's motivating all of this, and how the leaders of Judaism, the high priest even, how they justify plotting to kill Jesus, is that it is better that one man should die instead of whole people. Okay, and so they've set up their understanding of the situation that if they don't kill Jesus, Jesus is going to end up being the cause of the Romans destroying the Jewish nation. You pick that up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That
picked it
that
up. I
that
picked it up.
really sheds light on that first question I asked. So that's just bringing it full circle now.
I picked it up,
What
but
do you think? What do you think of that philosophy? It is better that one man should die instead of the whole nation.
the reason I'm questioning it is because I feel like is there what is what is the thing I want to say? The deed justify the means. I mean, I'm
Yeah, that the ends justify the means.
yes, that's what I'm trying to say, but it's it's like um, it's like anybody else who wants to twist those commandments for their own needs, you
Can,
know.
can
And
you think of a modern day example where somebody said it is justified to kill the leader for the sake of saving the nation?
Yeah, Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't so much. I'm talking very serious moral conundrum, and it's not this. It's within the last century.
Well, wouldn't that be what Donald Trump did to his vice president, Mike Pence?
Well,
but
yeah, no, I wouldn't. I mean, that wasn't serious about killing him. I mean,
No.
we have an example in modern history where there was a very real debate as to whether it would be moral to kill the leader in order to save the nation.
that was that during Kennedy's time in the Bay of Pigs?
No, a little earlier than that.
Hitler?
Hitler, exactly.
Oh,
A
yeah.
huge debate as to whether to plot to kill Hitler was actually a moral deed or not. Whether killing Hitler could be morally justified by an act to save the nation.
They do that now. I mean, they do that all over the world right now at these different leaders around the world. They still having this conversation about the same thing with different leaders around the world. Whether it's in
As a
Iran,
result
whether it's in
killing
Iran, whether it's in
people.
Korea, whether it's in China, whether it's in the
Yeah.
United States, they're still doing that, having the same conversation.
But what do you think about it? Would
Well,
it be justified to kill one man to save the nation?
Well, I can't.
I can't answer that. I mean, but to sit back like Hitler, and not like Hitler, but I'm saying to watch the Holocaust and the people who got killed in Poland and Russia and France as a result of one man. I guess humanly, if something should happen to him, I'd probably be sitting in front of the TV saying good. That would probably be my first reaction.
No, I'm still having problems. I'm still having problems because that is
No,
not
I mean,
what God is.
initially that would be my first reaction, but who am I to judge? I probably would give it a second thought. But as a result of millions of people who died, that might have been my first reaction. I
I
don't
think
know.
I agree with Loretta. Good morning, everybody. I think I agree with Loretta. From a very simplistic standpoint, just like Yeah, just for it, because everybody's going to follow this crazy person, right? And then take down a whole nation. But if we can just stop it, but morally we know it's wrong, but I think it just feels like it's right, but it really isn't right. It's so paradoxical. And that's probably the oxymoron of this question that Father Rich is posing. But um, I think, for the sake of the good, right? Almost kind of like that type of thing. You want
Yeah,
to say
yeah,
yes, but then morally you want to say no. So that's what makes it the oxymoron, I think.
yeah, because Sharon, I just can't seem to get I just can't get my soul. I mean, I know he's evil,
Mhm.
and the people about it is evil. But when I look at those commandments, it does not say you can kill somebody for the good of all. I don't see where that is in there. And does God make justifications for that particular thing? I mean,
Yeah.
I figure we could lock him up, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me
No, I
throw this
totally
one in
agree.
there.
Totally. Yeah,
What
Michael, go ahead.
what
Uh,
about the
I,
ideology though? Did you kill that? You killed the man, but did you kill the ideology?
Well, we've seen
Well,
that, I think, in
that's a wholly
several.
different story. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Father Rich? We're going to pose it back to you.
Well, I don't think there's an easy answer, but I guess the reason I asked the question, I always want to try to remind people that these are real questions that even we exist today. So
Mhm.
that when we're reading this, it's, we shouldn't just decide that the Pharisees and Caiaphas are just crazy, evil people, because we face these questions even today. And people argue about whether the death of one man is justified by trying to save the whole people. It's easier when they're enemies. So, I mean, it was our policy and we did it. We went after Osama bin Laden, right? We went and found him and killed him because that is how we were going to save our nation. So that's a little bit different from this because he was at least an enemy who was attacking us. And so, it does say thou shalt not kill, but we do know that you can kill in self-defense, right? If somebody's going to kill you, you don't have to allow them to kill you. You can kill them before they kill you.
yeah,
Uh,
but this isn't self-defense. This
and
is
so, well,
But
I,
the
I don't know.
self-defense has to
You
be
think
with
Caiaphas and the Pharisees would see this act as self-defense?
that's what they're saying here. That's what
And
they're
that's
thinking.
why, I don't know, I
that's
still
why
Father
going back
Rich,
to Donald Trump, like
I'm
Gardner
still,
said, I mean, he didn't attack us with weapons, or he didn't call the army, the navy, to attack us physically, but by him telling lies about COVID-19, as a result, 1 million people died because he selfishly was thinking about his own political whatever, but he didn't tell the truth. He wasn't honest, and people were dying as a result
So
of
would
his ignorance and his.
someone have been justified if they killed him?
I don't know. It depends on if it was, because seriously, I mean, looking at it from just watching TV and seeing other people die could have been one thing. But if it was a result of killing my own mother, I might have had a different thought about it. I
Okay,
mean, that's the humanistic side of.
okay,
Is that why Kennedy was taken out?
let me take you back. Let me take you back to 1968, when a man was standing on a balcony of a Lorraine Motel.
Yeah.
Was he killed for the good of the people? Or you think the person that shot him thought the same exact thing that you're thinking about Donald Trump? I mean,
I
well,
mean, it could
absolutely
be.
not. I
It
think there
could
are
be.
two
I don't
sides.
know.
I think there are two sides to it. I think that there is, what Donald Trump did to Mike Pence, trying to get him killed. I think just as many people thought that there was an heroic virtue about what that man was doing. And so that's why we have people going to prison today. And recently this week, we have 5 convicted. All these people thought there was an heroic virtue about what he was doing. There were people during Hitler time who thought there was an heroic virtue about what he was doing. And that was also power and greed, because all the things that the Jews owned, other people were able to take those things from them. They were able to take power, they were able to take land, they were able to take goods that they had. So the evilness of it, you know, the politics and the power of it is real, and it's real on both sides.
And Father Rich, I had to thank you for that question, because at least it challenges my brain. And it's a challenge when we go through these to keep the balance of applying it to us today and then looking at it for what it is when we're reading it. And that's kind of like a challenge for me, to keep that balance between the two.
Yeah,
That these questions are real. I mean, these things are happening even in our time.
even in our time, and they're being debated.
Right.
And so I only do that just because, you know, I think one of the things we always have to be when we read scripture is to be humble, and not to say, oh, well, they're so obviously evil, I would never do that. Because it's not so clear that we would never do that. And, you know, I think one of the reasons scripture survives for the thousands of years that it does is that it captures basic human tendencies. And those tendencies are as alive today as they were in Jesus's time. So that this is something we always have to be worried about, that we would justify the killing of one man to save the nation. So, I mean, when we look at it and we see that it's Jesus, you say, oh, well, you know, obviously that's a wrong philosophy. How could anyone believe that, because Jesus is the Son of God? But you know what? We adopt that philosophy in a lot of different ways. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. That is, though, I mean, when you think of the Gospel of John, you know, there are various things you might think of. This is one of the critical passages in the Gospel of John, that it is better for one man to die to save the people rather than the whole people. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you go through this. So all right, so we conclude Jesus no longer walked about in public among the Jews, but he left for the region near the desert to a town called Ephraim, and there he remained with his disciples. So Jesus kind of goes into seclusion as a result of this
He remained with his disciples.
all right, so let's do the last little bit about the last Passover. Who was reading? Was
Okay,
it Loretta?
Loretta. The last Passover. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before Passover to purify themselves. They looked for Jesus and said to one another as they were in the temple area, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast?" For the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should inform them so that they might arrest him.
Okay, so we now know that this is, you know, the time of Passover. So, you know, we're kind of entering the final part of Jesus's life and ministry. Now, one of the reasons that we say, why do you think we say that Jesus ministered for 3 years? How would we know that?
Because he was a part of 3 Passovers. Well,
exactly. Yeah, this is now the last of the Passovers that he is being part of. So it's really the Gospel of John that we get that from. If you were to read the other 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they don't really give a time frame for much. So it's hard to know over what period of time those events were occurring. But John organizes a lot of his scenes, if you remember, around Jewish holidays, right? The Feast of the Dedication, the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, all of that. So that actually, in John, kind of is the gospel that allows us to know that Jesus probably was ministering over about a 3-year period, because this is the third and final Passover. It's not the last Passover, right, for the Jews. It's the last Passover for Jesus. All right, let's go on. Loretta, you can, or if somebody else.
What you gonna, I thought I read it.
No. Now we're at chapter 12.
Oh, you're going to chapter 12. All right. On the anointing at Bethany. 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. They gave a dinner for him there, and Martha served while Lazarus was one of those reclining at table with him. Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil made from genuine aromatic nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and dried them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Then Judas the Iscariot, one of his disciples, and the one who would betray him, said, "Why was this oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief and held the money bag and used it to steal the contributions. So Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Let her keep this for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me."
Okay, let's stop there. All right, what's your impressions?
Okay, to Mary. Mary is their first impression. Now we talked about this earlier about the Mary. Which Mary was this? This Mary seems to be the Mary that we talked about earlier, that came to Jesus about Lazarus, being dead. So, and then in other books they talk about Mary being Mary of Magdala. So this one, to me, distinguished that this Mary is the sister of Martha and Lazarus.
Any reason to believe that she wouldn't be? I mean, if they're at the home of...
No, it wouldn't be. I just thought I'd bring it up because we had talked about it earlier about how the different versions have it.
Right. I mean, I would say on its face, it's pretty clear that this is Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, but you're absolutely right, Dee. In time, there are some people who claim that this is Mary Magdalene. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But as somebody who's just reading the story and you kind of know who the characters are, is there any reason why you would believe this is Mary of Magdala?
No, I would think is whoever. Right, it would be the characters that are here.
And if it was Mary of Magdala, don't you think John would have said that so that we would not be confused?
Right.
As to which Mary it was.
So why? Then the question is, why is all the other stories have it differently? And since John wrote his book later than the other versions, why is he so sure that this is the right Mary?
So this is, I think, one of the great examples of how gospel writing occurs and how an oral tradition is passed down and how different stories begin to get conflated into others. So there is a story of a person who anoints Jesus, right? His head and his feet, right? And there's an objection by the disciples, not by Judas, that again, this could have been sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor. And Jesus says, you know, the poor you will have with you always, but you will not always have me. So that there's a basic story in there that obviously got handed down to all four gospel writers. But interestingly enough, this is the only gospel that associates a particular woman with that story. Okay, so gives the story, attributes the story to Mary, the story of Martha and Lazarus. None of the other three do that. And this conflates two stories, because the drying of Jesus's feet with her hair, that's actually a separate story in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Did anybody remember that story? Okay, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that's the story of the sinful woman. Remember, Jesus is at the house of a Pharisee dining, and a sinful woman comes in and cries at the feet of Jesus and wipes the tears off with her hair. And remember, the Pharisee says, if he only knew who this was, he would not permit her to do that. And Jesus says, Simon, you know, when I came in, did you wash my feet? You know, did you offer me a kiss? You know, and, you know, it was, this woman has done that, and therefore her many sins will be forgiven her. Remember that story?
Yes, part of it.
Yeah,
Story. That's a separate story. So either John conflated all three of those stories into one, right? Or maybe this was the first one, and the other writers, by the way it was handed on to them, thought there were three different stories going on.
It's funny, and Miss Queen, don't get mad at me now. This is funny. It reminds me of a story. My mother would hear something, and she would say, they said such and such happened. And I would say, Mom, who is they? She said, I don't know, but they said. So this just reminds me of a story that's been taken, that has been passed down from one group to another group to another group, but no one can remember the name. So this one has a name, whereas the other ones don't really have a name. So they embellished on the story and added what they thought the person said, maybe.
Well, and in the other stories, the woman who anoints Jesus is not at all a sinful woman, right? But she also doesn't dry Jesus's feet with her hair. So the only story where a woman dries the feet of Jesus with her hair is when the sinful woman comes into the house of the Pharisee, okay? So all we can say in terms of, I mean, to me, this is one of the fun things and what I love about scripture study. If you're concerned about what really happened, right? The scriptures are kind of hard to figure that out. I mean, probably what you could say is, well, at some point in Jesus's ministry, there was a woman who anointed him with a special oil. And there was a time when there was a woman who dried the feet of Jesus with her hair. And there was a time when Mary was at the feet of Jesus. So maybe that's why John associates this story with Mary, right? Because remember Mary and Martha's doing all the hospitality, and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. So maybe that's how Mary got associated with anointing the feet of Jesus and drying. All we know is probably some of these things really did happen, but we're not really sure exactly how they happened.
So you just made two stories almost into one.
Oh, there's three stories, at least three stories going on here.
Right. Okay. The story that we already read earlier about Martha working. Here she again she served. There she is again and there's Mary again at the feet of Jesus.
Okay, well, wait a minute. Remember, the story of Mary and Martha, where Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus, is not told in this gospel.
Oh, it's told in the other gospel. Okay.
Gospel of Luke. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, we raised it because when we were doing the raising of Lazarus, they had very similar personalities, right? Martha was the one running around, shaking her fist, yelling at Jesus, and Mary was the one sitting quietly at home. But yeah, so I say this is at least the conflation of potentially three stories, or it could be the other way around. This is one story, and the other writers broke it up into three stories. But the story is, I think one story is Mary and Martha Jesus at the home of Mary and Martha, where Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And that, if you look at this story, Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, right? So that's one story. The other story is the story of the woman who comes into Jesus and anoints him with expensive perfumed oil. And the disciples object to it, that it could be sold and given to the poor. That's a second story. And then there's a third story of a woman who comes into Jesus while he's with the Pharisees and cries over his feet and dries his feet with her hair. That's the third story.
You also have to note that if she has this oil and they're in Lazarus' house, they must have money. They must have some kind of money in order to be able to feed all these people, and in order to even afford oil, because some people couldn't even afford oil to put in their lamps.
Right. If you could sell it for 300 days' wages, that's like a whole year's salary.
Right. So Jesus' friends were not poor people here.
So let me first, before we go on to more of this story, should we be concerned about the accuracy of the story, of like which one really happened? Is that a significance?
I don't think so in particular.
And why would it not be of particular significance? Why do we read the gospel?
I think it's because we want to get different interpretations. And so there might be some inconsistencies, but yet some consistencies, but the way that they were perceived and retold might be different. But as you said, there were different stories around the same theme, but it's just based upon interpretation.
And
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, because there are different approaches to following Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Okay, you're right. You're right on target. Let me press you a little, Sharon, on when you say different interpretations. What does an interpretation give you about the story?
I just think it's based upon one's experience, right? And how through telling a story or recounting a story based upon the lens of what their experience was for what they perceived to happen.
Okay, and that would give rise to the different interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you interpreting? What are you drawing from a story that is the subject of the interpretation?
How different people follow Jesus.
Right.
What I was trying to get at is
how they show their love for him.
the meaning of the story.
Right. There are different meanings.
So the gospel writers don't tell us the story just for the sake of recording history. They want us to learn something from the stories that they're telling. So they tell the stories in a way to give them meaning. And then, just as Sharon and Loretta was saying, the different meanings come about because of our different interpretations, which come about because of our different life experiences, which come about because of the different ways that we follow Jesus.
And going on as what you have led us on this journey, as you have led us on this journey to have us, the meaning that I'm getting out of this story is that this is the preparation that's happening. that they want us to get out of this, the preparations for Jesus's burial. That's happening at when he says you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. So they are sort of like when a body dies, they perfume the body, they wash the body, and all this. And this is what's not going to happen. Well, it didn't happen, but Jesus, it's happening right now. That's what I think this story is trying to tell us right now. This is the purpose of this whole exercise, I think.
Okay, so yes, absolutely. One of the meanings of this story is that the anointing is in preparation of Jesus's death.
Oh,
Okay, and that's how this story has a different take than the other three stories. The other three stories, it wasn't so much around anointing and preparing him for the day of his burial.
Okay.
But it's definitely here. So again, John tells the story probably for that purpose, to you know, can give the meaning of all of this in terms of preparing Jesus for his birth, his burial. So then what is the significance when Jesus says, you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me?
Well, it's not that he doesn't care about the poor. It isn't that, it isn't, and we know from the signs and wonders that he's done in the past that it doesn't have, but it is to take the significance off of the cost of the, what it says, Judas says here about, the money. It ain't about the money, ain't about who you giving it to. The most important thing is that you have me now, but you will not always have me.
Right.
And what's the significance of having him now?
The significance of having him now is that he's teaching them. He's making them their disciples. He's making disciples out of them, and they should be taking life lessons from this. But
well, let's look at what's happening in the story. What are they doing to him now that they would not always have the opportunity to do?
I think it's the physical manifestation of him being there physically, as you said, to prepare him for this, and through the physical manifestation leaves that memory and that legacy.
right. They don't know it though.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what this story is trying to say.
right,
That they may not even understand that this is going to be the only opportunity they have to prepare Jesus for his burial.
Being in a moment, appreciate the moment, because you
and exactly. So
exactly.
So it's not that, when people say the poor you will have with you always, I typically hear people say that to justify why they are spending extravagantly on themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
When someone says, how could you spend so much money on that when you could have given some of it to the poor? And they'll say, the poor you will have with you always. As if to say, what difference does it make? Because we're never going to be able to solve that problem. So I should at least spend some money on myself, to enjoy my life. That's not really what Jesus is saying.
when you and Sharon said that, it made me go back and think the lesson. When you said, Sharon, about the physical presence,
The physical manifestation
yeah,
of him
the
being
person
there.
now, it made me think of how we should take care of our loved ones, how we should care for them because we never know when they're not going to be with us. It made me think of that.
It's just
It
being
made
in a
me-
moment, right? Right,
Yeah.
right, Dolores. It's just, or Dee, just being in a moment, because the moment is what it is,
Right.
right? And if we don't stop and have that self manifestation of what we're doing now and the impact and living it with intent and purpose, right, and passion, then we're missing all of these opportunities to make exactly what Jesus did here, to
Right.
make himself a presence, so that whether you realize it or not, it will prevail and be a leading legacy. And a lasting one.
Right. So he's telling us about himself, but he also is telling us about the people in our, I see the people in our lives,
Yes.
but the people that we have in our everyday, our families, you know, the people that we, our friends, and that we don't, you know, we take them for granted, you know, and we don't cherish the moments that God gives us
Yeah.
to have them, to be present for them right now.
I love
You
how
know,
you connected that, Dee, just from
I'm sorry.
further elaborating on that. I love how you put that connection to that. So that's wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. It's not that you won't have opportunities to spend money on yourself. You might not always have the opportunity to care for another. And so when you have the opportunity to care
Yes.
for another, do it while you can, because you may not always have them. So even if it's just something as simple as saying, I love you, do it while you can, because you may not always have that opportunity. And I think that's what is at the heart of this story. It's not that Jesus doesn't care about the poor, or it's not that he's saying, oh, what the hell, I should be able to enjoy life every now and then, leave me alone. It's a lesson to say, when you have the opportunity to do good for another, do it, because you may not have another opportunity to do it.
You know,
It
and
makes me think of
go ahead.
when you were preaching about stay awake because you don't know the hour. It might not be that the loved one you're thinking about is gone. You could be gone. So, you know, you still lost the opportunity if you didn't do or say what you wanted to say at that time.
You know, I was remembering what, a year or so, they had the gospel on TV that John Legend portrayed Jesus in the gospel live version.
I was actually Jesus Christ Superstar, wasn't it?
Superstar, yes. Jesus Christ Superstar, yes, thank you. And I remember that part, and I'm seeing it in my head, and he did not give me the impression that we talked about now in that scene. I didn't see that in that scene when he said, you always, I remember him being on this little slab thing they were making, and then he got up and said, you know, because Magdalene, I mean, well, they had her as Magdalene doing it and washing his feet, and then he got up and said that word, but the way he got up, to me, it felt like he was saying what you just said, Father. He was just saying, you know, let me, you know, let me have one frivolous day. That's what it felt like when he was doing that, but not exactly what we were talking about now. I didn't get that from that play that they did.
And hence Sharon's comment. It's all different interpretations, right?
Mhm.
All right, you want to move on, or you want me to tell you about Mary Magdalene and how she gets associated with this story?
All right, tell us about Mary Magdalene.
Whatever you want to do.
All right, so
Father Rich, are you saying Mary Magdala or Mary Magdalene?
well, when you Mary the Magdalene or Mary of Magdala. Okay, so Magdala is the place that she came from.
Okay.
And so it's like saying, you know, Loretta the American or Loretta of America.
Okay.
Okay, so Magdala is a place. So she's either a Magdalene, which is what you call somebody from Magdala, or she is of Magdala.
Okay.
So we tend to, you know, conflate it and call her Mary Magdalene. But it's really technically would be Mary the Magdalene or Mary of Magdala. So there's no doubt historically from all the records we can see is that Mary Magdalene was a force to be reckoned with. She clearly had a very special relationship with Jesus. And after his death and resurrection, she clearly had some role of leadership among the original disciples. she was the first one to be entrusted with the good news. She was the first one to go and proclaim the good news. There's a whole gospel that's written about her and how she created and formed a community and led it. And there's also, from those other stories, pretty clear that the male disciples resented Mary the Magdalene because she was a female leader, and this is a patriarchal society, and it's really only the men who should be leaders. Well, that idea continued throughout the centuries, that we really shouldn't see Mary as a significant leader, that really Jesus only intended the men to be the leaders. And so as a result, Mary Magdalene kept being diminished in the stories and the preaching that would be told about her. And eventually it got to the point where they associated Mary with this story. It's Mary the Magdalene, not Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. It's Mary the Magdalene who is drying his feet with her hair. And we know from the other story that it was a sinful woman who dried the feet of Jesus with her hair. Therefore, Mary Magdalene was a sinful woman.
So we'd rather make her sinful than powerful.
And in fact, she was a prostitute.
We'd rather make her a sinful woman than to let her be a leader in the community.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that they labeled her or slandered her to be a prostitute?
They trashed her name.
Yeah. So yeah, because of the power. All of this is all about power, right? Because, and like you said, the women can't lead and can't. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we still have it today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's advocates for the ordination of women will always use Mary Magdalene as the reason why women should be able to be ordained, right? Because she is clearly a force to be reckoned with in the early church among the disciples. No other woman has the status that even Mary, the mother of Jesus, doesn't have the status that Mary Magdalene has in the Gospels. And the men can't stand that. So, what do? They elevate Mary, the Blessed Mother, right? Because, she's the humble, loving, kind woman, and she stays in her place. And therefore, that's who women should model their lives.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that is why they have a problem with her being
but there is no evidence in any of the Gospels that Mary was a sinful woman. The only thing we know about her before she became a disciple of Jesus is that Jesus expelled 7 demons from him, 7 or 6 demons from her, I can't remember. But so those demons probably had something to do with illness rather than with sinfulness, right? So it's possible that Mary was ill, that Mary maybe had mental health issues or whatever, but that Jesus cured her by expelling the demons from her. And then she took her place as a disciple of Christ. But there's absolutely no evidence to believe that Mary was a sinful woman.
Well, if God didn't want her to have power, he would not have Jesus reveal himself to her. And she really hasn't diminished because people have kept her alive over the centuries.
Absolutely.
Because once God has elevated you, there's no man on earth can de-elevate you, can bring you down. So no matter how hard they've tried, Mary Magdalene is still there. We're talking about her now. If she wasn't it would have been out of our memory. It would have been in this gospel. it wouldn't have been allowed to be in the gospel. Why is it in the gospels? Why is she in the gospels? If that is not what God intended, since all scripture is inspired by God, then there's a reason why Mary is in this gospel.
I have a question. I was wondering if the interpretation of wife is back then is different than how we interpret it today, because I believe she was also referred to as Jesus' wife.
No, no, there is absolutely no direct evidence that Jesus and Mary were husband and wife.
Okay.
The closest you get is in one of the apocryphal gospels, you know, so there are like, you know, you do know there are like 11 or 15 gospels that were written. Only 4 of them made it into the Bible.
Right.
But the other ones, there is one in which it says that Jesus kissed Mary on the mouth. Okay.
Which gospel is that?
Well, it's again an apocryphal one. It's not.
Oh,
It's
an
not one of
apocryphal.
Yes, I heard that one.
not one of the 4 gospels.
Yeah, I see.
Um,
Okay.
So at the most, there is the implication that there may have been a romantic relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Okay. But again, it's an apocryphal gospel, so you're not sure how much you could put into it. But it's really more, you know, the Da Vinci Code. It's the modern day storytelling that likes to make a, you know, the last temptation of Christ. You know, it's all the kind of the modern takes that want to read more into that relationship. I mean, could they have been married? Yeah, they could have, but you know, why wouldn't they have said something? You know, if in the Gospels, why would they, if Mary and Jesus were married, why wouldn't they have at some point said that? So, you know, the mere fact that nowhere does it say that Mary and Jesus were married, were husband and wife, it's probably, they probably weren't married. There's no doubt in my mind there was a special relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Whether it was a romantic one or not, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. You know, I would go that far. I'm not saying it couldn't have been, but I don't think there's enough evidence to conclude that. But there's no doubt in my mind there was a special relationship. He held Mary Magdalene in a regard that he did not hold any other woman in that same regard.
That's something.
Yeah,
So
that's what happens when people label you as a whore.
well, I mean, you know, God help us, but it is a typical male supremacy move. Is if you're threatened by a woman, call her a whore.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
That's what they do.
But that goes to the impact. She must have had a powerful impact over the disciples as well, to stay with them throughout the whole experience of Jesus, right? And I think about the Samaritan women, like how they try to dismiss her, but this Mary stayed with them the whole time up to his death and resurrection. But I'm thinking about what sort of impact or influence that she had over them or with them, that she's one of us, you know?
Yeah, my sense of it all, you know, because I've read the Gospels, you know, the apocryphal Gospels. My take is that disciples always had problems with Mary Magdalene, even when Jesus was around. But because Jesus supported her, you know, Mary Magdalene was not going anywhere. But once Jesus dies and rises again, and now you just have the church left, that's where the male disciples begin to marginalize Mary Magdalene. So you also get the sense from these other gospels that Mary is forming a community where she herself is the leader, and the male disciples are ostracizing her. And as a result, they're able to sort of overcome her significance, because she doesn't have Jesus anymore to be her champion. So I do think they tolerated her while Jesus was around, because Jesus insisted that they accept her. But once Jesus was off the scene, they did everything possible to marginalize her, and they succeeded. They were able to marginalize her so that she was no longer considered a leader in the church, as it gets passed down to us. And in fact, it goes worse. They not only marginalize her, that she's not a leader, but they slander her and she becomes a whore. So that's sort of how I see it, without any particular, evidence other than the number of stories that are told about Mary Magdalene. She was clearly a force to be reckoned with. Well,
Was
anyway, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, I don't know if we had talked about this before I read it, whatever, but she was a woman with many resources too. Is that right?
It's not clear. She could have been. At one point, Luke says that Jesus had several women disciples who supported him from their resources. So it's possible that Mary Magdalene was one of those women, but that's not explicitly said. But yes, Jesus hung around women with means. You got to support a ministry. You go out and you find the ones who can support you. So there's no doubt that there were women who supported Jesus's ministry.
Yeah, I just looked up some interesting facts about her, and one of them did say that she gave financial support to the work of Jesus and his disciples, and it was seven demons that he cast.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
according to this, right?
Yeah, which I would say that the idea that it was 7 meant that she was really in bad shape, regardless of what it was, because 7 is the number of completeness. So she was like completely and wholly possessed, whatever in their mind, whatever they understood that to be. Because remember, in back then, she could have had a serious physical ailment. She could have had a serious mental ailment, and they would have described it as demons, demon possessed. And then Jesus healed her. But there's a heck of a lot of difference between somebody who is very ill and someone who is very sinful. So, all right. Anyway, let's just finish this up because we're at 12:30. So the large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there at Lazarus's place, and they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And the chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him. So again, the whole fear of what the raising of Lazarus had in store for the Jewish leaders at the time. So why don't we leave it there, and we will pick up again next week.